We get to tell you guys why you're going to go back to the office. I'm Tom Bergeron. I'm the editor of ROI&J. I'm thrilled to be here with Jonathan and David. We're going to talk about what the future of the office looks like, the different trends these guys are seeing. There's a lot of good stuff. I know that we're all interested in where we're going. So let me start. I'll give each of you guys 45 seconds maybe to give you a spiel about what you do, and then we'll get into it. Jonathan?
I think one of the ways to get people back quickly is that Bitcoin guy. We should give out Bitcoin. So everyone, the line to talk to that guy was just gigantic. So I think
that'd be a pretty good amenity.
Yeah. So our company owns and operates office buildings, shopping centers, industrial buildings. Do it in New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, mostly suburban assets. Been doing it for 30 years, and we feel real estate's still a central theme of life, right? We work in it, live in it, play in it. So we don't think that's going away. It's just how are we going to use it, right? So that's sort of what we do.
So my name is David Opera. I work at CBRE. I work in our New York office at 200 Park Avenue. But I do have a partner who works in New Jersey and covers the state of New Jersey, which kind of makes me uniquely qualified to talk about both. So we're going to talk about trends that are happening in New York City in terms of office space and going back to work. And I can also talk about the New Jersey aspect as well.
All right, let's get first of all to the big question on everybody's mind, the pandemic, the post-pandemic workspace. You guys talk to a lot of companies, a lot of tenants, a lot of people doing leases. Let's talk about how, if we were having this conversation 2 years ago as opposed to now, what are you seeing differently?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think we unplugged the matrix. We were living in this get up, commute, we had a routine that we were all doing for years and years. And yes, it got a little bit different with mobility and just, Starbucks you could work at, and you had co-working spaces. But I do believe this was a huge change in mindset that everyone is sort of getting used to and now has to sort of relearn how we do it. Now, I feel office has a bright future. I feel it's a central theme to how we will work in the future. I just think it's going to change and it's going to be different. And it's up to, I guess, industries and C-suites and managers to figure out how that best will operate within their companies.
So pre-pandemic, I guess the trend on office space was trying to cram as many people into an office as possible, right? Like with the benching, we were all sat on top of each other. And what's weird about that was that's a uniquely urban concept because suburban buildings don't have parking to accommodate people sitting on top of each other. So the suburbs were trying to imitate what was happening in New York and other cities, and it was difficult to keep up, right? So that was certainly a trend that was taking place. I think clearly what people are hearing and organizations are hearing, we were trending for less space, but now as we're all talking about it, we know we're going to have to trend for different space, meaning how do we use the office a little bit differently, because there's a lot of resistance to going back to the way things were.
Let's talk a little bit about different space, because that's what we're trying to figure out. If these guys actually had the answer to the question, would be all set. Nobody knows is the right answer, but at the same time, you're seeing a lot of different things. Let's talk about Class A, let's talk about Class B, let's talk about amenities. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? How is this moving as we go day to day, week to week, month to month?
Yeah, so I think just some high level discussions. So if we talk about trends, how it's going week to week. The banks want everybody back. I think we all know that. Other service organizations want people back. Technology companies have been the slowest to adopt the return to work. The reason why, in part, is it depends on the industry where employees have the most leverage. Employees are kind of raising their hands and are a little bit resistant to go back to work. So the technology companies are listening, right? So they're slow to make a call on exactly what they want to do. And I was saying before, the hottest market in New York before the pandemic was Midtown South, which is where lots of tech companies were. And the least popular market in New York now is Midtown South in terms of actually what's going on, or the slowest to recover. So it's an industry by industry trend that's unfolding.
It's also by, schools are just reopened. I mean, it's not easy to go to work if you have, 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 10-year-old at home. So I think until now, where things are opening up in a way where people can have a semblance of order in their thought process, how I can get back to work and not feel like I'm mismanaging the other side of my life, which is your family, which is the most important, honestly. Getting used to not having to do, a routine that you didn't have to do for 18 months, almost 2 years. It's like a habit. Like, how do we get into habits? Because we overdo it, do it, and then we get stuck in it, right? So I think mindset's going to be a big issue. But when it comes to space, I'm seeing a flight to quality. I don't think anyone knows how much less or more space they need. I do think de-densification is a big thing, where they were doing, maybe one person for 80 square feet. Maybe it's going to 120. I think the 5-day work week, not every company has a demeanor of what that's going to be either. Some are going to be 4, some are going to be 3. It depends on the industry, depends on what you do. Even companies, they have accounting department. I mean, just because they do a certain thing doesn't mean they have all the other things that everyone else doesn't have as well. So I think this is a very big thing to think through. And we're at the beginning of it, but we are seeing momentum. We're seeing people now say, okay, it's time to try. We've never seen as much leasing activity at our properties since 2019. I mean, it's a lot. Now, are they just looking and checking and trying to sort of get back into the motions of things? Yes, some, but a lot, no. I mean, I think when people come back, you're going to want to have an environment that everyone maybe feels excited to be at. When it goes back to amenities, what are you making it to feel different, fun, exciting? Why did we like co-working? Why do we hang out in Starbucks and work? We want to feel a comfortable situation. We've been in our living rooms and all sorts of rooms that make us feel real comfortable working now. So I think you got to make some type of effort to do that.
And let me just throw out, look, you guys are here. You want to hear these guys. If somebody has a question, I can blather on all day. If somebody wants to shoot up a hand and do a question, that's all good. I want to turn back and talk about amenities, both from what you guys are offering and what companies are looking for. And I know Jonathan's company, Onyx, was way ahead of everybody else on safety and what you were putting into the office. And instead of talking about bean bags and free vending machines, you were talking about all the safety procedures, both in the Gateway in Newark and some of your suburban properties. Talk about amenities that you're offering. Talk about amenities that companies are looking for post-pandemic.
Why don't you go first with that? Because he represents the tenants, so.
Right. Yeah. So I think that tenants, when they want to go back to, like anyone who wants to go back to the office, there has to be a compelling reason why you go to the office versus sitting in your living room, right? Like, it's got to be better. There has to be a value proposition for the office. So that's number one. What's happening now, it's an interesting dynamic, and I think we're going to see more and more of it, is relating to the flexibility of working with your team and coming back to the office. It's not going to be a top-down decision where your CEO says, everyone has to be back. They're going to break it off into groups, and your individual manager is going to make the call and say, your group needs to be in. We want you in 2 days a week, because I know how my work, my ecosystem of my small team works best, and it may not be a one-size-fits-all. So what they're doing is, like LinkedIn and a lot of these other companies, is creating different portions of the floor for alternative uses, where there's a heads down section of the floor, where there's a collaborative section of the floor where those teams can go in, as I mentioned, 2 days a week, 3 days a week, whatever the manager decides. And then on the other side of the floor, you're going to have more of the traditional, like, food, but they're going to be vending machines instead of actually out on a platter, some of those subtle differences. But that's kind of what we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, also, I think some companies I've heard, if you come in 4 days, you get to have a picture of your family and your favorite poster in your, office area. 3 days, it's a hot desk. You could be anywhere on that floor. In 2 days, and it goes from there. And I think, they're just trying to make the most optionality happen for what people need. I think the younger generation, and like tech is more of a younger, up and coming sort of sector over the last 15 years. So a lot of young people are entering the business. I feel if you don't have a sense of a culture, eventually, yeah, you can have a purpose and a mission, but if you don't feel culture with people or some type of, social dynamic, I just think eventually that gets tough. I also feel like most of the things that I learned was by osmosis, being around where I always want to be around is way smarter people than me. Now, I can't, I could look up a Wikipedia article on someone that's smarter than me telling me what I need to know, but I got most of my ideas, my confidence, my energy, my, whatever it was at the time that I needed came from everyone around me. And I just feel that's irreplaceable. And I'm not saying we can't sustain, and I'm not saying it has to be that, manufacturing mentality, 5 days a week, commute 3 hours. But that wasn't really happening anyway. I mean, if you look at office buildings, they're only 60% occupied at any one time during the day anyway. People were moving around. And I also believe large companies are different than mid and small. The average company is like 10,000 feet, right? Like we read all these big companies doing big things, but most of the office market is mid and small size companies. And they need to be around each other to compete against these, and they become more nimble by being around each other. So I guess it's going to be a very fun experiment that we're going to, be all involved in. I mean, like, how many here in this audience have been back to the office? Raise your hand. How many people would never want to go to the office again if they didn't have to? Okay. So, like, that's probably 5, 8, 10%. I mean, that's what we're hearing. 10% of the people just seem to never want to go back, never want to be a part of anything except do their work, and that's okay, right? There's introverts, there's extroverts. I don't think we ever created office space for introverts anyway, right? We're all in this big bullpen, hearing noise, so I think that's going to be a very interesting dynamic switch. Do you agree?
100%.
I'm picturing like a Seinfeld episode where you pick the family that you want on the picture in the desk and say, oh, I want to have 3 kids today, so I'm going to sit over here and I want to be this and that. That's good.
It's digital. Just going to switch it out, right?
We had a question from the floor, which I love. Jump in. I want to be like Oprah here, but go ahead.
I was waiting all day for this panel, so very happy. So I'm a workplace futurist, a hybrid work advocate, and a founder of Soy Workplace. Our specific area of focus is on the ground, working with people, teams, and leaders right over there on transitioning from office first to hybrid ways of working. So I see it a little differently than the way you've described it in some ways, and it's actually the opposite. I think if you look at the media narrative right now, you would believe that everyone wants to pack a duffel bag, be a digital nomad, and run around the world. If I didn't have 3 kids, I probably would want to do that too, but a lot of people want to get back in at least some degrees of the week. But some banks are cutting space and only letting them back in one day because the savings on the real estate is so significant. So our area of work is having them realize in the long term by training their people on how to do hybrid well. So I think in reality it's the opposite. Companies are endeavoring to save all that money on that space, but people want more time in there. So I see it a little differently to you. So when you mention your leases and activity, do you see what I see in terms of cutting of space at large scale from companies?
I see. It's hard to understand when somebody's consolidating how much less space are they actually taking. Leases run long, so even though some people want to get rid of space, they can't, right? They could sublease it, which actually has been, a higher percentage of the market. But I'm finding most of the space that is coming into buildings that's new is not that much different than what it was and where it was. It's just reorganized. Now, if we were into densification like we were in the past, that would be different because you would be just putting as many people into a new Class A facility as you possibly could, and you could reduce it. But I don't think anyone wants to make a mistake. I pray we never have another pandemic for as long as I live, and we get through this and we move on and everyone sort of can get back to whatever normal is going to be. But if you're the head of facilities, you are not making a mistake by putting people too close. God forbid this happens again, right? So, yes, can they switch everyone to mobile? And, I think mobility, I think actually the cloud won this pandemic. I think even with mid and small size companies, you now are more mobile than we've ever been as a society. I mean, we said we were, but you got to get ready. You got to have the cloud to actually allow that to work. So I'm not seeing drastic. I'm not seeing drastic, I would say, space reduction, right?
I agree. I think just tangibly, the biggest trend like last year was all the sublease space that hit the market. And one of the bigger trends of this year is all the sublease space that's come off the market. And not because of leasing, because companies have resisted subleasing that space away until they figure out what the new normal is going to look like. So they didn't want to make that knee-jerk reaction just to recover the cost of that, in theory, excess real estate. So it's a little bit of a... So to what you're saying is true. A lot of people are thinking about how they're going to use their space, and they're not ready to give it away yet because of all the reasons you described.
Well, they tried, though. They just failed, right? Because no one was taking it, right? I mean, so this could have helped them out that we are where we are, and it didn't go fast, right? And nobody really made decisions.
Right, and gave them time to think.
Yeah.
Dave, you talked about with companies you would give, who were thinking about New Jersey, bringing that business to New Jersey. Now, we all know, anybody who owns a home in New Jersey knows that for a time, any house was selling for double what it was going for because everybody couldn't get out of the city fast enough and they wanted to buy residential real estate. Are you seeing that for office tenants wanting to head to New Jersey at a higher rate? Has it slowed down? Where do you see that phenomenon going of this escape in the city to go to the suburbs?
So I think that it's funny, all these trends get somewhat exacerbated by these situations.
It's
so
the media. They blow out of proportion all the time.
It's interesting. I would say, just in talking to my team, the New Jersey side of the house is the real pickup, and where things have been really, really strong in terms of tenant activity has been for the really good buildings. I know that sounds obvious, but it's true. And pricing on rents for these really good properties, Class A properties, have gone up. I mean, John can speak to it. His portfolio has a lot of that. And there's been a lot of activity. It's the lesser properties that still languish. And back to the original theory, you have to give people a reason to go back to work. So if you want the reason to go back to work, improve their work environment and their building. So that's why the good buildings are receiving all this attention and doing really well.
Yeah, and you've seen the transition, and CBRE had a report just this week talking about, I'm going to quote the number, 8.6 million square feet of New Jersey real estate that is in the pipeline to transition to industrial, to residential, to mixed use, and that's now, and that doesn't seem to be going away. That's taking the lesser offer buildings, and talk about that transition, both of you guys, and how that's going to affect the Class A space, because less is going to be there.
I mean, we're in the like a revolution. Like there's never been so much. I mean, real estate's pretty boring. I mean, it goes slow. We fix buildings. We lease them. I mean, like it's a great business. It's a creative business, but it's not a fast business. And there hasn't been really a lot of creativity needed until the last 10 years, right? I feel like we're more hoteliers than we are office building owners. You know, you actually got to, do more service and clean the bathrooms and do the things that you have to do anyway, but you got to add more value. I think that I've been around long enough now, I'm getting older, to see that every time we've had an issue where it was a down market or a cycle, when that's done, everyone goes this flight to quality thing for different reasons. Now it's because, listen, does a newer building have better HVAC, MERV 15, MERV 13 filters? Does it have maybe better, fiber, better, internet capabilities, touchless technology? Does it have more amenities? I remember before the pandemic, we were trying to get like doggy daycare and all these things that everybody cared about then. Now it's like, do I have to touch the elevator? Do I have to touch the door when I come in? So things change based on, unfortunately, this pandemic. So I think it's always a work in progress. Any company and any business that all they do is pay attention to their customer and listen is the ones who win, and that's all we do. So we're going to try our best to make sure that our customers are satisfied with what they need now, and we're going to build in enough ability to have what you need in the future, which we're all trying new things today, and hopefully we're right.
Yeah, no, I was just, go ahead.
Thank you. You guys have talked a lot about amenities thus far, and in terms of amenities, what have you been seeing in the transition towards sustainability?
You mean the whole ESG? Yeah. It's the trains left the station. It's something that I think every company thinks about now. Before maybe they thought about it, but now they're actually taking action. You have operational a footprint and an embedded footprint. Like, so facilities, maybe they're 30-40% of what your score might be for a company. So I think that real estate can only change so fast, so much. Maybe that's why some people are going into the newer buildings that have all the newer environmentally friendly green additions that like some of the old buildings, you can't even install it. Like, it won't work. The units are old or too old, or the system's too old. But I do believe that's a very important thing. I mean, you go as far as like Apple, all their contractors, when they're building anything that they own or they're involved in, they give you a list of materials that you have to use, and they don't care that it costs more. And if you can't build to their standard, you're not building for them. So there's going to be people that are going to lead the way. I think it's going to take time, just like, listen, when the internet first came out, we thought we were never buying things in a store again. Here we are, it's 20, 30 years later. We're seeing the effects, but we're still going to stores, right? So I think anything good that works takes time, and I think that's going to be something that is a focus now. No choice.
Let's talk about the flight to quality, and we're at a tech event, so let's talk about specific to the tech world. I'm sorry, no, you go ahead.
I have an incredibly loud voice, I hope, so I might be able to. I think in an effort to build some of that culture, a lot of companies have spent enormous resources just rebuilding their floor plans and building these open floor plans, trying to get, all the telecommuters in there and trying to just, really revamp everything. In an effort, I know companies are still figuring out what that hybrid model actually looks like, and I know, it might be too soon to tell how it develops. Do you see companies kind of going back to the before times of actually individual offices and the like, or is that not been thought about yet?
I think that that the day of the big office, the perimeter offices and bullpen is whatever. Yeah, that's not coming back, right? So I think we're using the term hybrid. Everything's a version. Yes, there's going to be some offices, but they're not going to be dedicated offices, right? So lack of dedicated space for people to be able to utilize them more frequently. But there's not going to be wholesale perimeter offices. Like, we're not going back to where we were. Like, it's just, I don't see that. And again, as we said before, I just think more of that amenitized group space where groups can come in and out of, that they don't have a fixed office location or a fixed location within the space is going to be the trend, and it has been the trend.
Well, it's like what he said before. Remember when you're in school, you went to the library, you had to shut up and be quiet? There's going to be areas now at your company that you're just going to have to be quiet, just like in train cars, right? I think there's going to be areas where you can now hang out like you're in a Starbucks, and there's going to be all sorts of cool things that you can do, work. I think, Zoom, even though I wish I never would have to be on one again for a long time. I think it was actually a great tool. I think you're going to have that capability in offices because maybe someone can't make it in that day. And, I think that's a whole nother dynamic of like 4 people are in a meeting and 2 are not. I've been in those. It's not fun. So I think, but at least you can keep progress moving and productivity moving forward. So I don't think we know, what productivity is going to mean, and it's going to take 2-3 years, right, to figure it out.
Really great stuff. We're down to the last minute, and thank you for your questions. Oh, let's do one more.
Thank you. There's something to be said about working from home in the sense that you have a lot of flexibility to attend to life needs that go well beyond the office. I commuted for 30 years to the office, and I sat in front of a desk, and it had a certain toll on my health and well-being. And when I'm working from home, and I've been doing it for 5 years now, I find that I can get up more often, go outside, get some exercise, and I'm taking much better care of myself. I do miss the camaraderie of being in the office, and what you were saying about the energy and the mentorship and the things like that you really can only benefit from on an interpersonal level. But I think what you're saying, and I think it's very important, is that in order to induce people to come back to the office, you've got to help them find that healthy balance, but also to have the real rich social interactions and the opportunities to network when they're in the office, and have that nice variety where you're not sitting in a cube or you're not with your door shut, And it really is that more rich social experience to make it all worthwhile, to get in a car and drive there and you know, give up on the kids.
And that's
picking up
why
the
I
kids and
think
stuff.
this is great, is like you're going to stay in the workforce longer than you might have. Because it could have been like, I can't take this anymore, I don't want to do it. And now you have a way, because like I think everyone at every stage of their lives adds a lot of value to everything going on at a company. And the more flexible that makes sense, I think is great. Just like someone that's brand new, if they don't have people like you around to learn from, I don't think their careers get to where yours got to as fast. So I think everyone has to just look at it as, you know, how am I serving the customer, the company in the best way with my talents, and everyone is going to have to figure it out. But there's no one way, I don't think either. It's like no one way.
All right, we're going to give Jonathan the final word, and I hope the takeaway you guys all get is that we're going to actually work more and longer, I think he just said. So we're all good with that.
Buy Bitcoin. No, only joking. I said, don't buy Bitcoin.
Awesome. Thank you very much. These guys are going to be off to the side. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Who ran amok in Kent? Lately he